It's Tuesday, August 27th, and you may have noticed, not actually Krista.
Krista's missing. For the better part of a month at this point, right?
Yeah. She's moving, but we didn't know that. We would have scheduled the news around that. ... We've done it before.
Let's start with the Jeep Pie, or at least his business. Now, this is kind of a nothing burger story, but it's still being reported. And the reason I say it's a nothing burger story is because, of course, we already knew this. Who didn't know this?
The FCC has no idea how many people don't have internet or don't have broadband access, internet access. And the reason this headline is happening is because two states are now, their ISPs in those states are now reporting their subscriber base the new way that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. And 38% of the people that were previously reported do not have internet access, do not in fact have internet access. That's 38% of rural homes and businesses that the FCC previously counted as having internet access do not in fact have internet access. That's it's almost 500,000 unconnected homes.
Here's what's weird about this story, though. So this is CostQuest Associates, a consulting firm working for U.S. Telecom, an industry lobby group that represents AT&T, Verizon, CenturyLink, Frontier, and other fiber and DSL broadband providers. So it's kind of weird how
a lobbyist working for the industry.
A Jeep Pie kind of fudged the numbers to make it look better for them.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden they've hired outside counsel to be like, no, he's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, is that a PR move or?
Well, no, it's by law. They changed, like, the law is that they changed the way that it was reporting because a couple of weeks ago or over the last few weeks we've covered how it used to be if you service one home in a census block, that counts. But that no longer counts by law.
But if you're the lobby group and you're hiring these people, could they just not find one that would lie?
Apparently. It is really interesting, though. I mean, as much as we do the Level 1 news, a Jeep Pie is very hardworking. Like in the most evil way possible, to be sure.
He's the hardest working man in corruption.
It's crazy though. Like most politicians, like there's just nothing to report on week to week what they're doing. But he is single-handedly dismantling the broadband infrastructure in America. It's crazy.
Oh, listen, he appreciates his position. He knows who got him to the dance, and he's going to serve them. And that's not the American people. Robocalling. This is another story that we hear week after week after week, and it's always the same thing, and here's more of it.
Phone companies and state attorneys general announce a broad campaign to fight robocalls. So let me just sum up what's happened here. The technical people have managed to convince the state attorneys general that are mostly Luddites that they're going to handle this and that everything will be fine and it'll be totally okay. But what this is actually turning into is a scheme for telecom companies to actually make more money from robocalls. It's basically not we're going to block robocalls. It is we need you to pay us in order to robocall, which of course naturally will result in a reduction of robocalls, but also an opportunity for profit.
It's the stir-shaking thing. Now, we reported on this. I can't remember which company it was. They were like, yeah, we've got this technology. We're going to give it to our mobile customers, but not everybody else. And so I think some things have happened and some deals have been made. So now they are going to give it to everybody else, and they're going to share it amongst the industry.
Do you think the telecom companies made it this bad in the first place in order to have a new alternative revenue stream?
Nah, they probably didn't. They're not that forward thinking. They're just capitalizing on a crisis.
Let's allow this problem to fester and then sit back and collect the fees.
Check out this stock photo. They went to such great lengths to match the theme of the phone to the nails.
Wow.
That's attention to detail if you're a stock photographer. Good job. Story number 3 continues the trend. It's the same stuff week after week. It's almost as if they have these talking points that they know people want to hear, and they just keep saying them, and these websites keep running the stories.
Shame on you, TechCrunch. Not really. I mean, it's fine. States to launch antitrust investigation into big tech companies, a report says. So you're thinking about tech companies. What they really mean is Facebook, mostly. Google, not far behind that.
Amazon,
and some other
Twitter.
companies. Twitter is very surprising because Twitter is hemorrhaging money.
Well, it's not. We talked about this last week. I don't think it's so much the money as it is the political clout
Yeah.
and
We blocked that video.
the shaping of the public thinking. And no, this is a little bit different because this is attorneys general of a variety 20 states. Before last week it was the FTC, so this week it's the states. But everybody's got these companies in their crosshairs. You got to be shaking in your boots if you're Zuckerberg.
There was one thing in this article that I had not considered, and that is, you know how we were talking about, the whole Facebook merger of Instagram, and it's going to be Instagram by Facebook, a little bit like Jacob by Mark Jacobs for Mark Jacobs, that whole thing. So if Facebook proceeds with that level of integration internally, company-wise, that's going to make a breakup as a result of this in the not too distant future much more difficult.
Well, I think the FTC guy mentioned that in that article last week. He was like, "Hey, we're telling you that this is wrong, and that we're looking into it, and you're consolidating.
We need to hurry up the consolidation to make it more difficult for you to do that." I think does that mean that Google with Alphabet is more forward thinking, so that if there is a monopoly breakup, they can just be like, all the components of Alphabet are now autonomous, we don't care?
Probably, but it won't really be like that.
Even if all of the components of Alphabet were autonomous, if search was one of those, that's large enough to be considered a monopoly on its own.
But are you going to stop the search team from working with the ad team? Those are so integrated.
Yeah, that would be difficult. It's like you're not allowed to work together by law.
And then you're not allowed to use the search data to fuel the ads. So what's the point of the ads now? So you kind of...
Oh, that's foreshadowing for another story about the ad sandbox thing.
Well, and so now we can get out of the trend of the same old, same old. This is one that you rarely hear, and this is some excellent news. And you kind of have to wonder, because the email spear phishing and scamming is so ubiquitous. I mean, we get them every day, but nobody ever gets caught, right? Well, finally.
Justice Department has indicted 80 individuals in a massive business email scam bust. So the Department of Justice and the FBI worked together on this one, and they actually rounded up 80 people, and they've been charged. So this is going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. These individuals were responsible for sending millions upon millions of emails.
Well, these individuals weren't. The people that were actually doing the grunt work of the scam are in Africa. These guys were just here to move the money around. Mm. And they mentioned it was like $80 million.
Yeah.
They made a lot of money from this.
There are a lot of lonely old people that talked to the Microsoft support scammers and gave them a lot of money.
Yeah. And these are Nigerians. These are the Nigerian princes that you've heard of, which is funny because they really do have millions of dollars. They're not going to give it to you.
Now, I will say that, well, I mean, I probably shouldn't say that, but there is a certain, I remember an argument from a politician a number of years ago that was something to the effect of, the heathens in Nigeria got internet access. They weren't ready for it. Of course, this is going to happen. And we discover we brought it on ourselves.
But is it really heathenry? I mean, they're kind of adroit at using it.
Yeah.
We're the idiots in this equation.
Yeah.
Now, let's see. Valentine Ero and give that one a shot. Can you pronounce that?
Valentine Ero and Chukwudi.
I think that's right.
Christognagus Ingwokwe.
You really didn't get the last one, but
Igbokwe.
Igbokwe. Yeah. These were the highest level guys they caught. These were the guys that had, it was $3 billion since 2015. Wow, it's $1 billion industry. That is staggering, not just because of the amount of money. What do you think the average steal is?
Well, it costs $3 billion, but they only made a few million. Like, the ransomware destroyed $3 billion worth of businesses, but a very small fraction of people actually paid the
But they do mention some, like 30 million or something. But so what do you think is the average take per victim?
Like per victim? Mm. Well, if the victim responds, it's a lot. But if the victim doesn't respond, then it's not much. So if you take into if it's
40 million.
If it's everybody who received an email, it's pennies on the dollar. I mean, it's like they profited about 5 cents per email.
Thanks, TechCrunch. I did too much scrolling. Anyway, I'm glad they caught him. Although the true offenders remain, the African princes remain at large. We do have extradition with Africa. Think they'll give them up?
No, I don't think. I think that. I mean, so this is it's a situation where the criminal enterprise was literally happening in California, not Nigeria. It's just that the dudes in California were actually from Nigeria, but it was like, I know some people in another country that would happily do this email thing, and it's like, what?
Well, I think they were funneling money back.
Yeah.
So, follow the money, right? Do you remember that time that ruling came against Qualcomm just out of nowhere?
From the FTC,
and
yeah.
the government was like at odds about whether or not we should do it, and everybody was like, what's going on here? Because this was the week after Qualcomm and Apple settled their stuff.
Yeah.
And Qualcomm was riding high because they had won. Well, that story continues to drag on and nothing's really happening.
Qualcomm wins a pause in the enforcement of the FTC ruling. So the FTC ruled against Qualcomm in the antitrust suit, which is amazing to me because a lot of the evidence in the FTC antitrust thing was from Apple. And in the Apple versus Qualcomm suit, it showed that Apple was acting in bad faith, quite plainly, very bad faith, malicious, in fact. And I don't understand how the FTC didn't look at the evidence presented in that case and maybe think that Apple was being, not exactly honest.
So the ruling here is they invalidated all of those licensing agreements, and they had to go back and renegotiate without the requirement.
Without the requirement, they license a patent.
Right. So this puts a pause on that. So I guess those agreements will go forward for another, 90 days? And
it's worth pointing out that the patent licensing thing was part of something called FRAND, like fair and reasonable. I don't know. FRAND is like an industry standard patent licensing practice, and Qualcomm's technology legit is the most valuable. Like, that was demonstrated with Intel constantly dropping the ball with their 5G modem, both in terms of power utilization and in terms of just how good it was. And Qualcomm was not pulling, say an Intel where it's like, oh, we've got the market leader. We're going to charge you $3,000 for that 28-core 5 gigahertz processor that requires 1 horsepower of liquid cooling. That's what market leaders do. And Qualcomm is not doing that.
We'll see. Maybe they'll just let them off. Maybe after they get their teeth into Facebook and Apple and Google and get that revenue stream, they'll just quietly let Qualcomm go. We'll see. Drones. We, of course, have learned that, we're going to get delivery by drone, and we're going to get surveillance by drone, and drones are going to kill us eventually. I mean, they're kind of already doing that. So if you are the keeper of the drones, that has to keep you up at night, right? Because you know what they're capable of. What do? There's an answer.
The U.S. Army wants to microwave drones in midair. High-powered microwave weapons would fry the electronics in an unmanned aerial vehicle. It's basically phasers from Star Trek. This is a very early phaser from Star Trek, and they're going to, shoot stuff out of the air.
This is literally just a big-ass generator. That's all that's in that box is a big generator, and this thing up here is the microwave. And they have a little video. It's only a few seconds long. Oh, there she goes. Yeah, that's the microwave. It's a little anticlimactic because you can't see it. And now the cool thing about this is they talk about how there's a targeting system, but it's pretty broad spectrum microwave. So even if the targeting system is taken offline, just point it in the general direction of where you think they're coming, and it'll take them down, as long as the generator's running. The other thing is fleets of drones, which we're afraid of. It's like swarming drones, each with their own bomb or whatever. No problem for this thing. Just back and forth to wipe them out.
Definitely don't stand in front of it.
That could be bad for your internal organs and your cellular makeup, for sure.
A lot of things. Also, that's another foreshadowing for a story later later this week or later in this episode.
Now, this one turned out to be a video, but it's not a complicated thing. So
This is the shortest story that we've ever had on the Level 1 news.
we've had videos by mistake before, but it is interesting. So, what was the name of these little pouches? I've seen these used at concerts and stuff.
Like the little RFID pouches.
They have a brand name or whatever, but you can, like, if you go to a concert or a comedy show or something, sometimes they'll secure your phone in this little pouch. It's like checking your coat. On the way out, you give them your card and they unlock it and they take their pouch back. Well, we've got a new user of the pouches.
California high schools, as it turns out, has banned students from using smartphones. So you go to the school, you get a little badge. It goes in the little RF blocking pouch, and it locks. And the only way to unlock it is like with the token or whatever. So, nice.
So you get it back at the end of the day. You do get to keep your phone, but you don't get to. Now, there's one part of this video I wanted to. Okay, this is the part of the video right here. The scroll under this identifies this guy as a student. What is he, 36? Look at that guy. That's a high school student?
There's a lot of hormones in the beef these days.
Some of the students were lamenting it, and one of the things that the biggest complaint was, I'm not even allowed to do it at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And, like, what happens? Also, if your phone starts ringing and it's in the pouch, you can't stop it, right?
No, it blocks radio waves, I thought. Maybe not.
Oh, yeah, I guess it could easily just be a little Faraday cage. So I expect this will pick up. We'll see more of this.
Yeah.
We just spread by the propaganda from that company. They probably sponsored this video.
Look at how much the grades have improved since people aren't worrying about instant communication anymore.
Some of the kids actually did admit that they felt like they were doing better. So, gosh, there's several clicks to get to the meat of this thing, of who was affected. Here we go. So there's really no headline. This is the texas.gov page, but the story is cyber attack that affected a lot of agencies.
So it turns out governments like to share their infrastructure. It was the Federal Bureau of Investigation Cyber in Texas, Federal Emergency Management Agency in Texas, other cybersecurity partners in Texas, the Texas Division of Emergency Management, the Texas Military Department, Texas A&M University Systems. Wait, why is the university connected to these things? Dun, 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 dun. Department of Public Safety, Cybersecurity, Computer Information Systems, Technology and Electronic Crime Unit, and several other divisions.
Massive cyber attack. The whole state, basically.
Everything was connected together, which is a no-no.
So they are having a pretty hard time, and they have, this is update, what was it, like update number 3 or whatever. So they're kind of giving a blow-by-blow of what happened and telling these government agencies, here's what to do, considering nothing works. I don't know if they've fixed it up by now or not. They did not do an update after August 20th.
Yeah. They did confirm it was ransomware. So it's amazing that the ransomware was able to spread through the network that completely.
What do you think? I mean, I guess this is just the glacial movement of bureaucracy. But do you think government agencies that haven't been affected by now, are they aware of this? Are they talking about this?
No.
Like, hey, did you guys see that what happened in all these other states and it was the worst thing ever? What if that happened to us?
The other agencies that haven't been affected by this, it's just because they haven't ported the ransomware to Card Punch yet.
So, look forward to this coming to your town soon.
Your town doesn't even have proper backups. What are we talking about?
Space crime.
I read this, and this seems like a nothing burger that the media is like just running wild with.
Well, it's a juicy story, right? Because
only because space.
Well, not just because of space, because space crime is so hot. It's the first time we've had a space crime, right? Unless you count the drilling of the hole in the space station. We don't know what happened there. That could have been malicious. But this is, I guess, not convicted, but proven space crime. Also, it was a woman, which is, that's hot news, and her partner was a woman
Yeah.
who was the victim. So this checks all the boxes.
Well, so the headline for the BBC News is NASA said to be investigating the first allegation of a crime in space. So apparently these two had shared a bank account, but they separated and they no longer shared a bank account. But the space crime here was that the one partner checked the other partner's bank account. Now
From space.
From space.
That's the important part. From the space station. Literally used the space station connection to log into a bank.
Now, she said through her lawyer that the reason for that was to check to make sure that her partner had enough money to take care of a kid. There's a kid involved.
I think they had a joint child. I don't know if it was adopted or if like one of them had it.
So I don't know. I don't know if this is one. Was that wrong? Should I not have done that situation? Or if that like this doesn't really seem that malicious because it wasn't like she's taking money or anything like that.
But the other woman did report it and press charges.
Yeah.
So.
But she had the password. It's not like she hacked into it. It's like she knew the password.
Well, just because you know somebody's password doesn't mean it's okay to log into their bank account.
That's true.
I mean, this is now. Should she do time for this? Probably not. That seems
excessive,
overboard. But at the same time, okay, throw out everything you know about this story and make it like a creepy, stalkerish guy who won't leave somebody alone.
Oh yeah,
and he's doing this from the jail instead of the space station, and you're going to look at it under a different light.
What if it was a joint bank account that they just hadn't settled yet? Like it was originally a joint bank account, and then it's not now because they're separated, but they just hadn't finalized that.
If her name was still on it, there wouldn't be anything wrong with it. It had to be under the other person's name.
Yeah.
So, only the other person's name.
I don't know if there's criminal charges yet or not, but maybe.
It's a great headline. And we've established space crime. So now they do answer the question. You're wondering who takes care of space crime, right? Well, this would be a federal investigation because it crosses state lines. But there's a rule about space, and it's whatever nation you're from prosecutes you for your space crimes under the laws of that nation, which is interesting because, like, what if we had somebody in the space station who was from a place with Sharia law?
I was thinking more like Russia. Like, what if the person in Russia was like installing malware on the space station, and it's like, hey, Putin ordered me to do this.
Or China. You know, he's watching some copyright films up there, and I'm like, you pirated those. Like, bro, I'm from China. Just back off. We don't play.
I think it's already like that.
And speaking of space, remember that scrappy little Indian space program?
Chandrayaan?
And they were going to the moon.
That was the name of the thing.
Good news.
They made it to the moon. The Indian spacecraft launched last month is now orbiting the moon. The next thing is it's going to land. It's going to land in a flat spot between two craters, and it's AI, hand wavy, that is going to try to pilot the thing and have a soft landing. It's landing somewhere that no other moon lander has ever landed before, and it's going to try to figure out exactly how much water is hidden in these two craters because they're in shadows because of where they are.
It's the dark side.
So
it's the dark side of the moon, and that's why there's ice there. And they suspect there could be tons and tons of ice there, which will make a perfect space station place.
Space gas station.
Although in perpetual darkness.
In perpetual darkness. Well, I mean, if they can manufacture fuel, just start, burning it. Like, have the have the oxygen and the fuel, and then just burn it for light. Maybe the moon will end up with a thin atmosphere.
That seems a little wasteful. How great would it be if we managed to terraform the moon by mistake, by polluting it to the point that we created greenhouse gases? The old unintended consequences. Well, facial recognition, we talk about this every week. Now, here in the States, there's this very two-sided approach to facial recognition. Some of our more liberal states and cities are outright banning it. And some of the more aggressive ones are basically partnering with Amazon. And it's very different. But over in the EU, they're looking to make some laws about this.
The EU wants strict limits for indiscriminate facial recognition. Europe could introduce sweeping reforms governing how facial recognition technology can be used. So CNET has a write-up here and an article. There are some differing opinions in the EU as to how this should work, but it seems like pretty much universally they agree that law enforcement should not have access to a database of facial recognition where they can just, Google the database basically and be like, where was Katie Holmes this week?
They also think there should be rules about when you are under facial recognition, there needs to be a ton of signage so that you know, because you should have the option of just turning around and walking away before you get into facial recognition.
You're getting really near Downing Street, so you're on CCTV, but the facial recognition is turned on. But when you cross this street, the facial recognition will be turned up to 11.
You know what they should do? They should graduate the coloring of the street lights for the level of surveillance. You start out at a nice green, and you go into just a deep foreboding red.
A nice Kremlin red.
Have you seen the footage? Those Hong Kong protesters are cutting down the facial recognition camera trees.
That's amazing.
That is, what a great protest. I mean, when you see people on marches and like burning cars and setting businesses on fire, it's like, what are we really accomplishing here? But you got to give it up to the Chinese. They're so pragmatic. They're getting some good stuff done while they're doing their protests.
It's like, listen, we're not gonna loot Tony's pizza. He's a hardworking businessman. But that camera recognition tower, it's coming down.
I think it's great. Fantastic. We have heard of a lot of weird things happening with the internet come out of Ukraine.
Yeah.
Ukraine was the one that shut down the heating, right?
Yeah.
In the building.
Because it was mining cryptocurrency.
Yeah. And a lot of this is another one of those places where kind of like Nigeria, where it's kind of lawless, but you have some really talented people who don't have a means to otherwise use that talent or that intelligence. So they do stuff like this.
Employees connect a nuclear plant to the internet so they can mine cryptocurrency. Yeah, it's a nuclear plant, tons of free electricity. What do you get when you have free electricity? You mine some crypto.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And, probably would have never noticed that even that huge draw on electricity in a nuclear plant, right?
Yeah.
It really is a great place to do it. But they were found out. They found the hardware. And they were trying to hide it in like the nondescript regular office computers, which in like Ukraine is former Soviet. They were probably like the drab, brown, basic cube PC case. It's like looks like it's from the 80s.
Why does this 486 have a 2080 Ti in it?
Well, that's the thing. It had they were 470s, I think, right?
Yeah.
They mentioned what they were. It wasn't ASICs. Oh man, yeah. The RX 470 GPU, and they had 6 in one situation, and then they had
5 in the other one.
Another one with more of them in it. So what they're talking about here is this: they're not charging them with theft, even though that's what you'd think they would do. But they're saying because a nuclear power plant is a critical infrastructure and a state building, by doing this, you've created a security risk. And that's what they're going after him for, which probably carries a lot more of a penalty.
Yeah. Now, if they just plugged into the electrical grid and ran their own networking wires, it would have been fine.
Well,
mostly.
They so there was like an administrative building, and then there was the plant itself, and they were in the administrative building. And ZDNet did not. They weren't able to ascertain if the two networks were connected.
They probably
so that might have been the case. Although if you could get into the administrative part of the network as a hacker, you would still have access to some important stuff.
At the very least, you could fake an email from the administrator that's like, go remove the cooling rods right now. Do it.
Run a patch cable over to the other building and plug it in. Speaking of the Russians, or at least people in the general vicinity of the Russians, Moscow came up with, they're going to have an election pretty soon. And they came up with a brilliant new system. Of course, we talked last week about Georgia's voting system, which Windows XP
is bad.
And it's flawed, and we found terrible problems with it, but we're going to go ahead and use it because there's no time not to. Well, This kind of mirrors that, although at least they tried, right?
Moscow's blockchain voting system, who knew, cracked a month before the election. French researcher nets a $15,000 prize for finding bugs in Moscow's Ethereum-based voting system. So, I wonder how Moscow coerces the votes. Like, do they just have people standing over the people that are voting and it's like, no, you're going to vote this way?
Well, so the way that this is compromised is very suspicious, I think, because it isn't the method of cryptography. It's that they used a shockingly short key. A key so short that the researcher beat it in 20 minutes with a desktop. And it was a French guy, and he was like, listen, I don't speak the language that this software is in, so I don't know exactly how much I just broke it, but here's the private key. And I did this in 20 minutes. So what you're saying, like, was that on purpose, or was it just someone who didn't know what they were doing?
Yes.
I mean, I could totally see it going both ways. I could totally see it being, okay, we're going to do blockchain voting. Cousin Vladimir, you know how to do that, right? And he's like, he woke up and was like, well, yeah, sure. And he went to the internet, and he got the most basic
tutorial
blockchain, and then they used a very short key for simplicity, and he implemented it. Or it could be, hey, we're going to change these votes later, so make it so we can hack it. And he's like, I got you. Yeah, no problem. Either way, $15,000 prize.
Nice.
Not bad. Denmark. What was this? We did a story about Denmark last week. What was it?
The royal family?
I think that was somewhere else. I don't know. You might be right. I don't know. I thought we did another story. But anyway, Denmark is generally pretty liberal and up to date, and like you don't hear all these terrible things about them usually. I don't think we've ever had have we ever had a data leak out of Denmark? That might have been what it was.
Oh yeah, the data leak. Yeah.
Anyway, one thing that they do in Denmark is they use phone location, just like we do. If you remember the Google case, where it's like the feds, hey Google, give us every phone that connected to this cell tower in the last month because we're looking for a murderer. Well, they do that in Denmark, but there's a problem.
Flaws in cell phone evidence prompt review of 10,000 verdicts in Denmark. So this has to do with location finding, location tracking, and just even like time of day type stuff. It's a in these court cases, the prosecutor will say, it's like, no, we knew with absolute certainty this is what this was, but it turns out that it wasn't so certain.
And they were even associating the wrong phone numbers with certain locations, which means that you could be considered a suspect in a crime. You were never even there. However, it seems to be an import problem because the phone company said, listen, we just gave them access to the data. Our data is correct. So we don't think this has anything to do with us. This has to do with the police importing the data incorrectly, which is terrifying.
Neat.
So all these cases have to be reviewed and possibly retried.
Can you imagine if the phone company system, somebody has a typo in the account name, there's just an errant comma in there, and like the police do the CSV export, and then like every row after that is shifted by one, and they don't notice, and they're like, this is fine.
Yeah, I could imagine that pretty easily, actually.
I think we've experienced that.
Speaking of foreign governments and doing terrible things, remember Kazakhstan? Kazakhstan had their root certificate, and it wasn't really a brilliant move. It wasn't a hack. They literally just said, hey, install this certificate or we'll kill you.
It doesn't get any more ham-fisted than that, really.
Well, I guess good news maybe if you're from Kazakhstan, because our glorious tech companies are taking a stand.
Apple, Google, and Mozilla block Kazakhstan's HTTPS intercepting certificate. So Kazakhstan has popped up and said, it was just a test. But this thoroughly and completely defeated their HTTPS intercepting certificate. The bad news, though, is that this root certificate, like the trust for this root certificate, is still installed on a lot of PCs in Kazakhstan because ISPs told their customers they had to install this if they wanted internet access. And so now these companies are detecting those certificates and will not let you browse if it's injected. So Kazakhstan turned it off because they called attention to the fact that Kazakhstan was doing this. Like, I think that your average internet going citizen in Kazakhstan might not have put two and two together. Like, the ISP is having me install. Oh, it means the state can spy on my stuff. What?
Yeah, and of course, if they just straight up blocked you, they might not understand that either. You know, you got this old rural grandma in Kazakhstan. She just wants to go and look at Facebook pictures, and all of a sudden,
potatoes.
And now she can't do that. So it's a mess, and you got to wonder. Yeah, I don't think this is going to stop them. I think they'll just try to be a little bit more covert in their next attempt.
This was just a test, which is what they said to avoid utter embarrassment.
I should already be embarrassed. We talked about crimes in space, but other things went to space this week as well. And this one is considerably more exciting, I think.
Russia sends its first humanoid robot, Fedor, into space. It's like virtual reality, augmented reality. The dude in the VR helmet is the robot. And it's being held up with rope, I just noticed.
I think that's just for the photo.
Oh, okay.
Because it's going to be weightless.
They said that they strapped him in, and the robot pilot said, "Here we go, here we go." I guess that's something like what Yuri Gagarin said, the first Russian that was in orbit, first person to orbit.
Also,
who was Russian?
Before the corrections, I believe it is Fyodor in Russia.
Fyodor. Oh.
I know that because of Emelianenko. So yeah, he's going to go up into space, and we don't know how good he is at doing things in zero gravity. That's what they're trying to do. Now, the cool thing about him, he's AI. He can learn these tasks once they are performed. So let's say you have him turn a screw with a screwdriver a couple of times. Well, then maybe he'll be able to do that on his own.
We're sending the robot to space because we can't have the cosmonauts drilling holes in the side of the space station anymore. The robot will just vent the compartment into space, close it, and then...
And he's guaranteed not to hack your bank account while he's up there. That's the other cool thing about it.
He lacks the manual dexterity.
They also talked about maybe he would be used for deep space missions once he gets good. He's going to get good for a while, then we'll just launch him out.
Well, the communication there would be a problem. I mean, the latency of signals to the moon is substantial. So,
well, that's the thing. Once he learns,
he can just be on autopilot.
He doesn't have to have the human driver anymore. So, I don't know how good he'd be at analyzing what to apply to a given situation. Maybe a loose screw, he could figure that out.
I honestly expected Amazon to do this first. Like, they've got the little wrist things, and we joked about that. And I sort of expected Amazon to be the first people with humanoid robots that were trained based on, like, the wrist pickers data. So, like, the AI is trained that way.
What if you had... So, you've got those shelves that drive themselves, right? And they have quadrants set up on them. That's how they track everything, right? So, let's say you're getting a book from quadrant 4. How many other Amazon employees at that same moment are getting a book from quadrant 4? What if those other ones were robots and they were simply waiting for a human to hit the same quadrant for the same type of item to mimic their movement?
We don't know how to do this. We got to wait for a human to do it. Oh, okay, now we know.
But you still save time, right?
Yeah.
And money.
Yeah.
Waymo. We talked about UPS having the self-driving truck that was secret. And actually somebody in the comment was like, hey, you say, where's Waymo? Here in Phoenix, because Phoenix is where they do everything, they're everywhere, and we hate them. But
thank you, random commenter.
The suffering of the Phoenicians might be benefiting the rest of humanity.
Waymo has released a self-driving open data set for free for use by the research community. So probably all of this data is coming from Phoenix.
Yeah, and now you might be thinking, oh, it's a little crazy to give that to your competitors, right? Well, there is a license agreement. I imagine it's pretty egregious, but they're saying that they'll give this to academics, but they could also be talked into giving it to a small self-driving startup type of deal because they do want to move the industry forward.
How long until Elon Musk downloads this? It's like, oh man, I need the secrets.
He's definitely got a copy. he's starting a university right now just to get a copy of this.
He flew to American Samoa just because the license couldn't be enforced there.
Ironically, he's going to resurrect the University of Phoenix for that purpose. I was not aware of this. Have you ever heard of this before?
Yes.
This is surprising to me. So when we were growing up, they had just converted right before our time. All standardized testing was bubble sheets, and we did that in grade school. But by the time we got to high school, it was like, no, we must write essays. Everyone must write essays, and grading essays takes a long time. And I imagine that you want to kill yourself after about 20 of them. It's got to be pretty, especially for high school students. Well, there's an answer.
Flawed algorithms are grading millions of students' essays. Fooled by gibberish and highly susceptible to human bias, automated essay scoring systems are being increasingly adopted, a motherboard investigation has found. So I think probably about a year ago, we did a story on a student that submitted a paper that was just complete gibberish.
Just word salad.
Yeah.
I remember that now, yeah.
And this is, they're still using it. It's like, it's fine. What student is going to have the balls to submit a word salad paper? Turns out kind of a lot.
Now, they point out two unique instances of how this works. Now, it's funny because they claim that this is somewhat racist, right? But language is a standard. There is a right and wrong. So they point out that overwhelmingly black students, because of their cultural bias, they don't use proper grammar, and they'll leave out words and they'll mix things around in sentences. And we've all heard the cultural speak of some people, and the algorithm hates it, and it marks it down. And they're saying that the algorithm cannot identify creativity or even a correct answer. All it sees is "we is," and it just flushes it. Meanwhile, Chinese students, who also were not great at the language game, were amazing at vocabulary. And the algorithm loves it because it's kind of like the word salad that we were talking about. So, pretty consistently, they would see that black students would be graded low, whereas Chinese students would be graded high, which is interesting because the algorithm doesn't know the race of the child.
Yeah, it's like it stumbles across the words. It's like, oh, this is the correct use of the word cromulent. Excellent, plus 10 points.
It's literally like that. So it's interesting now, but at this point, to go back to grading by hand, I don't think we could ever do that, right?
No.
I mean, it's just too much work.
It's too much work and nobody wants to do it.
So
what sort of a hell have we created for ourselves when it's like we can't even be bothered to educate the next generation? It's like, it's too much work. No one wants to do this. But
I will say, as much as AI can't be racist. Let's just stop pretending that it is. It can't be. It is just the fact that we give it rules to follow and it's following them. But are we really teaching our children anything if we're not grading them based on actually coming to the right conclusion? It's how well they presented it.
Not just that, but also it's like, is there a thinking problem here, or is there like a rationality problem? Because you could get into a situation where the student is writing something that is completely like the wrong way to think about a problem, and the AI would never catch that. It'd be like, oh yeah, this is really well reasoned.
If you gave me a problem about the curvature of the Earth, right? Like I'm estimating some issue based on the travel of a bullet concerning the curvature of the Earth and bullet drop. And as a student, I gave you a brilliantly worded, perfectly grammatically correct essay about the Earth being flat. Do I get graded well for that?
Yes. Yeah, you absolutely would.
What kind of terrifying world is that?
Unrelated, there was one of those flat earther shows where the guy accidentally proved that Earth was round, and he was like, that's weird. I'll have to look into that.
We got a great flat Earth story coming up later. Not in this episode. I can't remember which section it's in, actually. I think it's in social media.
Oh, I thought this was going to nonsense, but I guess it's fine.
You put this in here.
Well, is this, okay, yeah, because we're doing robots. I thought robots was going to go with nonsense.
You categorized this one.
It's fine.
I can't take responsibility for that one. So yeah, this is nonsense. But if you think about it, again, it's the AI.
Yeah.
And the AI simply cannot make moral or critical thinking calls.
Like you were saying, it's not racist. It just sees violence against something and it's like, no, this must stop.
It makes a lot of sense, right?
Save the robots. YouTube accidentally removed robot battle videos for animal cruelty. Robot builders across the country cried out in agony. This is mostly fixed at this point, but there are still reports of videos that are being flagged for animal cruelty. And there are still a lot of videos with animal cruelty on YouTube. It's crazy. But yeah, it's like, oh, look, this robot exploded. It's like, nope, animal cruelty.
Who's consuming those videos? Is that really a popular thing to watch?
Animal cruelty? Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, wow. So, but I also wonder, what about nature videos? Like if a pack of lions is pulling down a water buffalo or a wildebeest,
Oh, yeah, that's going to get flagged.
How would it know the difference? Because if it can't tell the difference between a robot and a small animal, and if the robots are just fighting, like I've definitely, on the Level 1 Cats channel, we have 2 cats fighting on there. Is that going to get flagged? Because I assure you there's no cruelty. They love it.
I am sure that all of that is going to be demonetized, including this video, for just even mentioning any of this.
Level 1 Cats is not monetized. It does not have that many subscribers.
Well, that's it for this episode. We'll see you tomorrow when we're going to have
business and I can't remember what the other one is. I think we're going to do social on Friday. So it'd probably be business and security.
Business and security, and definitely not Krista. See you tomorrow. It's Wednesday, August 28th, and there's so much amazing stuff happening.
I will start with Tesla. And I'm going to start with what is probably some good news for Tesla. Because I love bad news about Teslas, and there's a lot of that afterwards. So, full self-driving, level 5. That is the holy grail. And Musk says we're going to get there. We're close. But a lot of other people say we're a long way from that. Who's right? Well, we have maybe some more information.
Antec has Hot Chips 31, Tesla's solution for a full self-driving. So this is the hardware reveal. That custom hardware that they were talking about for years, and we sort of mocked them. And it's like, look, there's all kinds of stuff out in the open market. Why would you come up with your own hardware? Well, here it is. It's a picture of the hardware. Now, they didn't demo it in full level 5 mode. They demoed, I think, level 4, but level 4 was fully operational.
They did talk about a lot of the reasons they did their own, and a lot of it had to do with power consumption and thermal properties, because, you can't have it overheating. It can't ever overheat.
Can't overheat in Phoenix.
And, the power stuff has to do with kind of breaking it down into individual modules to meet how the power draw demands and stuff like that. How quickly it can put all that together, because in full self-driving, it has to be really quick. So they answered a lot of those questions. It's like, here's why we did it. Here's what we did. Here's all the problems we ran into, and here's how we tried to overcome them. But again, no level 5.
Nope, not yet anyway. There's actually a lot of really interesting stuff at Hot Chips. The most interesting thing for me was the company that had the giant wafer-size AI chip that didn't care about defects. Like, they designed it so that the entire wafer is a chip, and the entire wafer is going to have defects. But the chip was designed in such a way that it could work around defects. So that was innovative. This Tesla thing...
Well, moving from 3 to 4, I mean, that's not something to sneeze at.
Yeah, that's true.
The direction we've got to be moving, so we can't put it down. It's an achievement. I don't know how it compares to what everybody else was doing. Like NVIDIA's... Did NVIDIA get to level 4? I'm not sure about that.
No, nobody is at level... we
also haven't seen these on the road.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is... I'll believe this is level 4 when I actually see it, not in a demo video on the screen.
Just going to do a little rearranging here. So, that was the good news. But there was a lot of bad news about Tesla. Now, I'm going to consolidate some stories here because this kind of rolled out over a number of days. First, there was Walmart. Walmart had solar roofs installed by Solar City. Solar City, right?
Yeah.
And Solar City was purchased by Tesla. And one of those deals that seemed a little
Sketch?
nepotism, if not incest. And it's been, critiqued by a lot of people. Well, there was a little bit of a problem. Some of those roofs burst into flames.
Yeah.
And you think it's just like, well, probably just it was installed wrong. And, this is definitely not the fault of Solar City. This is not a thing that happens everywhere. But wait.
Amazon joins Walmart in saying that Tesla's solar panel caught fire. So it turns out that Walmart has been working with Tesla since 2018, and a lawsuit has been filed. Am I getting ahead? I might be getting a little bit ahead. There's a lawsuit involved with all of this as well.
No, yeah. So we find out that both, and this happened a lot.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very uncommon. And actually, one of the Walmarts, they disconnected the roof.
And it still caught on fire.
And it still burst into flame. They also found out when they filed the lawsuit and brought in some external people that there had been a small short that had caused a little tiny fire that just put itself out before they came to fix the roof the first time.
Yeah.
And Tesla just chose not to tell them about that. Or Solar City. And then,
it's fine.
On top of all that, we get this from the Business Insider.
Okay, yeah, this is what I was looking for. So last year, Tesla initiated Project Titan, a nationwide program to replace solar panel parts that could cause fires. So it was like a solar controller and an amphenol connector.
Yeah, the connector was the part that would burst into flames. Now, you left out a word there. Stealth. Stealth program. Meaning that at some point, Solar City and Tesla knew that these roofs were a problem. And they chose to just creep out and fix them.
there was a comment from there were two problematic comments from somebody at Tesla. One of them was the engineers, like there's an app that you run on your phone apparently, and so like the Walmart managers were expected to run an app on their phone, and whenever there was a problem with their roof, just report it to Tesla and like we'll come fix it. And so he's like, look, they didn't report that there was any kind of a problem with their roof, so we didn't come to fix it. We didn't know. And then the other thing was somebody from Tesla, I think, said that the failure rate here is less than 1%, but it was 7 Walmarts out of 240, which is quite a bit more than 1%.
Yeah, and that's a Walmart burning is a lot of danger to a lot of people.
One of the Walmarts was closed for 8 days, which I imagine Walmart takes very seriously.
Oh, that's got to be at least like $16 million, right? Yeah. So they had spokespeople from Tesla responding to this, but they also had some people who were speaking and anonymously as employees of the company. And the picture they painted was, it wasn't so much that it was malicious. It's just that it's the things that we've seen from other leaks of Tesla. It's just like, you have no idea the madness. And it's like,
it's just pure chaos.
And they actually made the pun, we're constantly putting out fires and no one knows what's going on.
Well, if they want to spin off Solar City into its own thing that manages like supply chain and crap like that, I'll be glad to handle that as long as there's no interference from anybody else outside the organization. Because they can make money. It's a profitable product. This is literally just a management problem.
They couldn't make... Solar City was its own thing. It failed. They bought it to save it from failing, which was probably illegal.
It's fine. The technology's caught up. The technology's moved on. Everything from China is so much cheaper now, so it's fine.
Well, electric vehicles, though...
Oh, wait, tariffs.
We should point out that electric vehicles are not just Tesla. We have some more coming onto the market. And we have them in some use cases that I certainly found this one surprising and pretty cool.
Electric dump truck produces more energy than it uses. Lisa, in this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics. No, what it is the truck drives to the top of the hill or the top of the quarry unloaded. It gets loaded with rocks. And then it uses regenerative braking to capture all of the energy going downhill fully loaded. So
it's massive. It's like 110 tons unloaded. So you can imagine those brakes are generating quite a bit of electricity. So pretty cool. I wonder how many cycles you think that battery can handle like that.
It should be on the order of hundreds, but maybe more.
hundreds isn't that many. What do you think it's doing? Like 3 a day?
I'm thinking like yeah, probably. I mean, probably not a lot. I'm thinking like cell phone batteries, where it's good for about 300 to 600 charges. Definitely not more than 1,000.
That's going to be an expensive. It's got to be a big battery, right? But the torque that thing requires to go uphill.
That might be a different battery technology.
So, anyway, still pretty cool. Still a step in the right direction to when we can finally have electric cars that I actually want. Amazon, if you don't know, they bought Audible, the company that sponsors every podcast in the world except this one. And
it would sponsor this one. It's just DIY. Like, we have to go sign up for it, then give you guys a code, and then you use the code to do stuff. And
it's commission, though, right?
Gosh darn it. Just join Patreon. Look, we're lazy. Or buy something from the Level 1 store. We got some really cool shirts and water bottles and all kinds of stuff.
So Audible, they do Audible books, audio books. And we talked about audiobooks last week. We had a lot of comments about people who said they listen to audiobooks. So I guess they're popular. And it's interesting because they're looking to add a new feature, and it raises the question of, if I'm generating content from my content that just happens to match your content, is that infringement?
Top U.S. publishers sue Amazon's Audible for copyright infringement. What, pray tell, is going on? Well, Audible is adding closed captioning to their audiobooks so that you can read the captions while you hear the audio.
Which is, that seems crazy.
Isn't that like reading the book?
Yeah.
Like, you have the book.
But why would you be listening to Audible with a screen in front of you? I guess in your level 4 Tesla?
Yeah. I mean,
while you're driving.
But apparently that's some type of copyright
now,
infringement.
Do I understand this correctly, that Audible is not using the original text? Are they using like speech to text to generate that?
That's what they said, yeah.
So it's not necessarily the copyright material, but it's going to be damn close, if not identical, if done perfectly.
Yeah, but doesn't Audible have the license to do the audiobook version?
That's what I'm thinking. If they're simply taking their product and then putting it through the algorithm that then generates the third product.
Isn't that just format shifting?
Is this something that we want the court system to decide on?
Is this something taxpayer dollars is going to be spent on deciding?
So many taxpayer dollars. Yeah. We've talked about Google a lot, and every recent story about Google that isn't "we need to break them up" is the internal staff being angry about one thing or another.
Yeah.
And it turns out that, from what we've seen at least, the internal Google staff has become insanely political.
I wonder why.
You know who's not a fan of that?
Google doesn't want staff debating politics at work anymore. It's like literally the War Games movie where, the Whopper finally decides at the end the only winning move is not to play. Something we decided on the Level 1 forums a long time ago. Yeah. So Google doesn't want staff debating politics at work because it's a mess. It's a real mess. Of course, everybody's complaining about that now.
Everybody disliked that. So, yeah, the big thing about Google that they've always touted is the open workplace, right? You can air your grievances and you can post things. They have that internal message board. And so
it's literally the Monty Python skit where it's like, we're going to have open intellectual debates. And by the end of it, they're just rolling around in the mud.
Basically, yeah. So now Google is saying, no, we're still open. But when you post your, anti-Trump rhetoric, your 5 paragraphs of hate, or your anti-ICE stuff, and then it starts this big argument and nobody's working, we don't want that. Can we try to avoid that? And the employees so far don't seem to be going for it. So we'll see how that works out.
Oh, Lord.
I think it does make sense to try to get the workplace as apolitical as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really fault Google for that.
Gonna have to have, that's fine, but that's gonna have to go all the way to the top. We can't have Eric Schmidt sending emails that are like, we're here to support Hillary. We can run her campaign for her, or just send over bathtubs of cash, whatever.
Or donating money. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think they'll give that up. Yeah. How old's your phone?
It's pushing 2 years. It's like 16 months or so. I gotta get a new one soon.
Mine's very old.
Yeah.
I don't know how old mine is. Like 5 years old, right?
Is it? I don't know.
It's the Droid.
Maybe.
It's pretty old. And seems like we're right there. I mean, the average between the two of us, we're right where we belong.
Americans are waiting 3 years to replace their phone, studies find. New phones' features aren't enough to convince users to get yearly upgrades. Well, yeah, I mean, most modern phones are garbage. I took the G5 with me when I went to Taiwan because it's got the dual radios and the modular battery and stuff. And literally the screen came unglued. And the G5 is like 4 years old. But it's fine. If the screen hadn't come unglued, it would have been completely fine.
That's a big if. But yeah, I'm never using my phone and thinking, oh God, this ancient piece of junk. I need a hot new phone with new features and new cramware that I can't get rid of.
Yeah, the software, honestly, it feels like the software is stagnating and there are not a lot of really cool features, and there's not a lot of innovation in the smartphone game. Like, the new Note 10 is out, but there's not any substantial new features. There's enough, like, imagine a Note 10 where, like, there's a microphone in the pen so that you can use the microphone to make notations or whatever, and it's really good audio from that. And then you can use the pen for pen things, but you can also do video editing. You can use DeX for docking your phone and making it a more like a laptop or a tablet experience, and then really getting the software right with those experiences. But it's none of that. It's like we're going to waste all of our software R&D time on Bixby. No one wants that.
Yeah, and I think we kind of have the young folk, the drivers of your hot sales are kind of moving away from the phone being the symbol of things, right?
Yeah.
Like we've become, the young people are communists. So they're not impressed by having the newest and the latest things anymore. It's cooler to have old technology.
I'm doing everything on a Nokia 6300.
I'm so unique. Netflix. So Netflix had the star rating. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody liked it. And then they decided they didn't want that anymore because it was very useful. So they went to the thumbs up and thumbs down. And that's supposed to help the algorithm tell you what to watch, and maybe that's not working either, so now we have a new iteration.
Netflix is testing human-driven curation with the launch of collections. And they've got some example collections there. There are even more examples in the article. Short and funny, or if you like this, you probably like that kind of thing. There's so much in the Netflix catalog that this was inevitable. Like, I don't think algorithmically they can do enough top-level organization for things and have it make sense.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I wonder if they will ever reveal whose collection you're following, and then can you try and get more collections from that person, or is it even one person? Because like Steam curation is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I agree with this person on games most of the time. Let's see what they like. Google Music does something like this, and they'll have it's not necessarily a genre, but they'll pick like just a description, like a one-line description, or it's like, heavy metal songs by indie pop, acoustic artists. And I find those really interesting. And I find that if I find something I'm interested in, I like almost all of them. But they're so short. There's only maybe 20, 30 songs in each one of them. So it's definitely not the AI doing it.
That intern didn't have enough time.
Exactly, yeah. And that might be an issue with these too. So we'll see. Remember the Apple credit card? It was amazing. And what made it amazing, other than the fact they give it to you, even though you owe money to literally everybody, including the Chinese mafia, is that it's made of titanium. Wow, that's a status symbol, right? And it's very minimalist. It doesn't have anything but your name printed on it, so you can see that beautiful titanium finish. But wait.
Apple Card can be damaged by wallets and jeans. Yeah. So, is there any? I mean, could there be a more quintessentially Apple headline? I mean, it's like, we're Apple. We're going to reimagine how credit cards work. We don't need numbers on the cards. It's all done electronically through the app. Oh, by the way, this card will, just burst into flames and be weird and also be discolored and terrible.
I mean, what are the two places you store your credit cards?
Wallets and jeans.
And your pockets, yeah. And so that's just astonishing that it doesn't work in that way. There's some great tweets at the bottom of this story. People making fun of it. It's like, here's the outfit to wear.
My new Apple outfit.
Yeah. But the best one was the guy who talked about it. It's like, after using your Apple card, please return it to its uniformly lit white cube. But they do admit that, it will discolor. I mean, that doesn't make it not work, obviously. It doesn't affect the chip. But your beautiful titanium card will become the color of whatever you store it in.
Credit cards were literally made to be disposable and replaced every couple of years. Is this really the best way to use the world's supply of titanium?
Yeah, titanium. Jesus. Oh, this one was great too. This Apple card cloth coming in 2020, $789. You can totally see them doing that.
Does anybody even have a wallet anymore? Everybody's got the clip that they use with their phone, obviously.
Well, that could be something they'd sell you. Yeah, make it out of microfiber, and it just attaches. That'd be perfect. Well, we talk about people adopting new phones, it's slowing down, and Apple is probably the company hurting the most from that, because their whole thing is, you buy one every year. You got to be part of the cult, right? You got to do everything, and it's that time of year.
Apple readies camera-focused Pro iPhones, new iPads, and a larger MacBook Pro. So there's a bunch of leaks here. None of this is confirmed. We'll probably cover it again when it's actually released. Just know that if you're getting ready to buy a phone, maybe wait a couple of weeks. That's really all you need to know.
Yeah, they didn't have a ton of details about this, but I imagine they probably won't have a ton of new features because we really haven't heard anything new.
In fact, no, they won't.
That's probably just going to be more of the same.
Yeah.
A little bit faster. Camera might be a little bit better.
We have to call it Pro now, though. Pro.
Is it anything you're going to notice? Probably not. There might be a hot new color that you can only get this year. Now, phones, of course, have radios in them. And you might have never thought about this, but that means radiation in your pocket next to your genitals.
Is it ionizing? Right. Is it not? We don't know.
Well, some people will tell you one thing, others will tell you another. But that's why we have the good old FCC. And we can trust the FCC. We've learned that, right? Because the FCC will test every device that goes up, for mass market sales, and they will make sure it stays within a certain range. But
turns out that the Chicago Tribune recently launched an investigation into the radio frequency radiation levels output by popular smartphones and found that some of Apple's phones are allegedly emitting radio frequency radiation that exceeds safety limits. So the FCC is going to go back and retest all of these phones. When Apple was asked about this, they said, and I quote, "You're holding it wrong." That was one of the things in the testing. They were like, you have to hold it a certain way. And so they did retest it. And when the phone has sensors that detect it's being held a certain way, it does actually lower its output radio frequency.
But what if you're laying down?
They did another test with a different phone. I think it was an iPhone 7. And they couldn't get it to detect that it was being held. So it was always just blasting it at a higher level. And so Apple said, well, you're doing something wrong in the test.
The 7 was the worst offender. Now, the most recent phone, that's not the X anymore, right?
No.
Or is it still?
No, it's like the, I don't know what the latest it's the newest iPhone.
Those did okay, including the X. But the 7, now, so the situation here is your phone probably isn't always doing this. This is a combination of
worst case scenario,
bad signal in a bad location, and you actually talking on it for a long time. So that radio and the battery combination is such that it is doing everything it can to hang on to that connection, and it just ramps up the power. And by default, the radiation is going into your skull.
And then brain cancer.
So Yeah, Apple did immediately respond to this, and they were just like, "No, you're stupid." And
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess that they also cited, they were like, "Listen, the FCC tested, it's fine." So
The FCC also said it was going to retest these, so we'll see.
you think Apple's on the Ajit Pai approved company list? He's mostly just telecoms. So
I doubt
although
it.
I think like AT&T and all those big companies, Verizon probably step in on behalf of Apple, right? That's a lot of their business.
Could be. Well, iPhone 7, though. What if the FCC found that only older iPhones have the radiation things? And then there would be like hey, come to Verizon, get $100 off the new iPhone that's not going to irradiate you.
All iPhones except for the iPhone Pro are extremely irradiated. So you must upgrade.
I don't think this is ionizing radiation, but it's still beyond the exposure limit, so still problematic.
Is that a risk we want to take?
No.
DoorDash got caught paying the drivers' salaries from tips. Well, they used the tip to pay as much salary as possible. Then they paid the minimum on top of that, which betrays the whole idea of a tip. And the internet went crazy, and everybody did stories about it. And DoorDash came out, and they were like, "Oh, okay, you're right. You know what? We're going to stop doing that." But there's a problem.
That was a month ago, and they're still doing it. DoorDash is still pocketing workers' tips after almost a month after it stopped to promise. Promised to stop. There we go. Getting a little low on the blood sugar over here. We've got quite a few more stories to go.
So they interviewed some of the workers, and I think they actually tested themselves because, anybody can be DoorDash. So these reporters just sign up and do a couple of deliveries and see what's happening. And, yep, turns out they are not paying tips, and they are radio silent on why that is, which is a pretty common tactic for big companies these days. It's just like, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to be better, and they never do it or never get better. So who knows? Last week we talked about Ice Lake, and it was kind of interesting because, okay, Intel finally has 10 nanometer laptops. That's something, right? They've finally done it. But that makes this headline really weird.
Intel's line of notebook CPUs gets more confusing with 14 nanometer Comet Lake. And the slide literally says 10th generation Intel Core processor Comet Lake. Up to 6 cores and 12 threads. LPDDR4X. I don't know how we're even going to cover this on level 1 because we've got, would you think that all the processors in a given generation are all the same lithography?
Clearly not.
Because they're not. There's a few notebook CPUs that are 10 nanometer. It's like the new X299 refresh, not 10 nanometer. The new desktop CPUs coming in 2020, not 10 nanometer. The new Comet Lake CPUs, not 10 nanometer. Although they do have the backported LPDDR4X controller from the 10 nanometer CPUs, but it's on the 14 nanometer process.
The other weird thing about this is performance-wise, stacked up to Ice Lake, this is almost the same offering. However, some little changes like power and some of the base clocks and the turbo clocks are a little different. But when you factor in the old graphics processing, which they don't have the new one, like the sexy new one that was on the Ice Lake, you get basically the same performance. So why would anybody buy this?
The same performance as last gen, you mean?
No, I mean if you bought the higher performing Comet Lake, when you factor in the graphics,
it's the same.
the real world experience is probably going to be similar.
Well, the Ice Lake is also only up to 4 cores, 4 threads right now. So if you want more than a 4-core, 4-thread laptop, 10 nanometers is not in your future.
Weird. It's a weird. You almost wonder if, do they know they're not going to be able to get enough of those 10 nanometers out there to satisfy demand?
You almost wonder if the Intel 10th generation is some sort of very expensive PR stunt where 2 out of 50 CPUs in the stack are 10 nanometers.
And you're never going to be able to get one. But when you go to Best Buy, and you're like, I was reading about this and I want this. And they're like, well, we're sold out of those. But look at this. It's almost the same. I'll give it to you for $100 less. Not good news. In a time when Intel needs more good news. Not good news.
Facebook.
Let's talk about security.
Okay. Facebook is first up with they've awarded $100,000. That's a prize for a new code isolation technique. Facebook awards the 2019 Internet Defense Prize to a team of German researchers for their work on ARM. So this is a way to compute values on a computer in a secure way where maybe the computer is not fully trustworthy, or maybe other processes on the computer are not fully trustworthy. So if somebody has access to the computation as it's happening, can we mitigate the fact that somebody might have had access to that transaction and still keep that transaction private while it's being computed?
Very important, considering we now have,
Spectre and Meltdown
and virtualization.
Yeah.
So when your cryptographic key is in the processor being processed, who's looking at it? Can you trust that? Now, this is not unique in terms of this has been, other people have come up with ways to do this, but they were all extremely expensive, and this one isn't. And that's
computationally expensive.
That's why it's worth $100,000. Well, it's not expensive in terms of actually doing it either. It doesn't require any hardware changes, and it works on all x86.
I sense an Intel job in their future.
What a terrible waste. So that's cool. And for once, a positive Facebook headline. They actually moved things to a more secure world. Amazing. Remember when Apple and literally everybody else was listening to those recordings? Not just listening to them, but the grunts in the warehouse were just sitting there listening to them and transcribing them. Well, that's stopped presumably, but now we have more details about how prolific it was, and it's incredible.
The Verge tells us that Apple contractors were allegedly listening to 1,000 Siri recordings a day each. That's about 2 per minute.
Imagine how brutal that lifestyle is. You imagine getting up in the morning and knowing that you're going to sit down and listen to 1,000 Siri recordings. And you're going to have to pay attention to them because you have to transcribe them or something else.
That seems really scary.
It's better than watching people kill lizards, but only just. If you're a programmer these days, you almost surely use libraries to make your life easier. It doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel every single time. And you build on the shoulders of giants, as it were. Unfortunately, you have to trust those libraries. And time after time, we see that could be a mistake.
ZDNet tells us that backdoor code has been found in 11 Ruby libraries. RubyGem staff have removed 18 malicious Ruby library versions that have been downloaded 3,584 times since July 8th. Kind of expected that number to be higher. I guess it was caught relatively quickly, but this is kind of this class of vulnerabilities is being termed open source supply chain attacks. So it turns out that any modern especially web applications depend on dozens, if not hundreds, of external libraries. Node, Node.js, npm, that whole enchilada, and this is the Ruby Gems thing, Python, even Go. And so unless somebody's really keeping an eye on what people are doing with that, it is entirely possible for a bad actor to get in there and add all sorts of terrible stuff to those libraries, and people might not notice right away.
In this case, that bad thing was, of course, cryptocurrency mining. That's what you do. And you can mine quite a bit of cryptocurrency if you have 3,500 instances of your library on various websites.
Well, and servers, too. It's like you download this cryptocurrency library and just run it, and it's like, wow.
Now, REST client was the big one. That's the one that you're going to use most often. These other ones were not. I mean, you see these are coin-related, some of them. So probably... it's like in the 200s of times, but still.
The Coinbase interface and the blockchain wallet, it's a little worrisome. I'm glad that, if I had to choose between, something mining and something stealing my wallet because, it was using the blockchain wallet thing, mining is okay. At least they didn't steal my wallet.
Yeah, but imagine if you spent days trying to track down what the performance hit your site was taking.
Now all of a sudden the server can only service 5 people, and before we had like 50,000 people. What's going on?
You'd be pretty upset.
Yeah.
And that could be like, that could ultimately cost you more than your Bitcoins just on the time you waste trying to fix it. So Steam usually has really good PR. Everybody loves Steam. I don't know how Gaben did it. He introduced DRM and made us love it. I don't know. He's brilliant. But they don't always get it right. Remember that time we had to come back from vacation early? What did they do?
Oh, yeah.
Was it to do with the refunds?
He came back from vacation. I'm sure the people in the comments will tell us. There's your engagement challenge, but yeah.
Well, they've stumbled again.
Researcher publishes a second Steam Zero Day after getting banned on Valve's bug bounty program. Valve gets heavily criticized for mishandling a critical bug report. So this security researcher was known to the Valve bug bounty program, and he's like, hey, I think this is a bug, I think this is a bug, I think this is a bug. And some of the Valve people didn't agree that some of the things were actually bugs. The last one that was found was a local privilege escalation exploit, which means that Steam is doing something with privileges, and an unprivileged application can convince the thing that has privileges to do something it shouldn't do. And so he pointed that out, and they said, oh, this isn't exploitable except by somebody that has physical access to the machine. And it's like, what? No, I can get somebody to do this if they just click a link or, download and run a program. You don't have to have physical access to the machine. You can totally do it any number of other ways. And so Valve has walked it back. Valve is like, oh, mea culpa, sorry, we should have handled this differently.
Yeah. So they fixed that first one, even though they claimed it wasn't a security issue. But they didn't give him his bounty, and they banned him when he complained. So he just released the next one into the wild immediately. And that was embarrassing. So, yeah. I imagine you do have to, if you are, devil's advocate here, if you are the person who's working the bug bounty program, you get so many false hits, people trying to cash in.
So many crazies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that security researchers are not the most socially aware group.
No.
So maybe give them some latitude. But then again, maybe not. I mean, they are insanely rich. They can spread some of that around, right? Personally, I've given them so much. MoviePass. MoviePass was a bad idea. It was a bad idea at first. It was poorly executed. And when it began to fail, it was almost criminal what they did. And you'd think that, okay, that's as bad as it's going to get. What else could they do wrong? Well, they say, hold my beer.
MoviePass exposed thousands of unencrypted customer card numbers. Yeah, so MoviePass had the open database. In the app.
So these aren't necessarily credit cards for the payment of your account. These are the MoviePass cards. Now, MoviePass cards are literally just debit cards. So what happens is you go in the app and you pick a movie, and then it communicates with the theater, and the theater says that this movie's $15. So they put $15 onto your MoviePass card, and you swipe it. So it's nothing special. Well, these cards are the ones that were exposed. In plain text, by the way.
Good job.
Not just the last 4 digits. The whole card. With names and addresses.
Are they back yet?
Who?
MoviePass. Weren't they shut down for a while to regroup or restructure or something?
I don't think they're ever coming back.
Wow.
Because they can't. It's not a business model that's ever going to work. Tracking on the web. Now, if you're a new viewer to the Level 1 news, you'll know that for a while we resisted ad blocking. And we still only do the most basic bitch of ad blocking. Ad block plus. And we do that for a reason, and people complain constantly, but it's like, okay, we are using these websites and we're sort of rehashing the news, which is not something new. Your local news station does this every day. But we should try to throw them a bone if at all possible. We had to stop doing that because the tracking scripts are so aggressive. They will destroy a browser with 20 or 30 of these major news sites opened in tabs. Literally, it will just stop working because they're so crazy. And WebKit has seen that as well.
WebKit Tracking Prevention Policy. This document describes the web tracking practices that WebKit believes, as a matter of policy, should be prevented by default on web browsers. Yeah, so this is a very long document that is, it's kind of exciting, really, as a developer, like working on some of this kind of stuff. They're like, look, we've had enough. This is insane. We're just going to block all of this. And it's like this type of tracking is not okay. And like if you find a technological circumvention for doing this kind of tracking, we're just going to block it without even announcing that we're going to block it.
So here they list some of the various kinds of tracking that they're going to get rid of. Now they also mention that, this might affect some of these kinds of things. So like measuring the effectiveness of advertising. And their response to that is, we don't care. It's so bad. Yeah, this might disrupt your business model, but your business model is horrible. So deal with it. They also talk about like buttons. I mean, Facebook has to hate this news.
Yeah. I think that there are actually a lot of Fortune 500 companies have invested a lot of money in their platforms. I mean, Adobe in particular has invested a lot of money in bringing together tracking scripts and content management so that you have quote unquote relevant content for your interests across the web on properties that are managed with Adobe products. And this is going to torpedo that as soon as it's implemented. So like any kind of functionality where content on a website is tailored to all of your tracking nonsense, that's gone. It was already a no-no to do that in GDPR land, but now it's not going to be possible with WebKit-based browsers.
Oh, those poor companies. I feel so bad for them. Oh, it just breaks my heart that they might have to suffer
Turns
horribly for this.
Does your company use Adobe stuff? Because it's going to be bad.
We talk a lot about Internet of Things. We're not fans, just to sum it up. And we're not fans because it's stupid to put certain things on the internet, because the Ukrainians are out there and they will find it. And maybe that happened here with these smart ovens.
Smart ovens have been turning on overnight and preheating to 400 degrees. June oven owners are reporting preheating incidents. Of course, the June CEO came out and said, no, this is user error.
But so he reported his thing about the user error is he says that it was kind of like a fat finger type of thing.
While they're sleeping.
He was like, yeah, you might be browsing through your previous cooks because, of course, right, you just sit in your bed and it's like, oh, let's go through the memory lane of all the things I've cooked this week. And then you might fat finger the preheat the oven button, which what kind of UI puts the preheat the oven button on the browser for the previous cooks? That seems suspicious. But yeah, like you point out, these people were asleep. They weren't using their phones. One guy made potatoes, and he made his potatoes and took them out of the oven and let the oven cool down, but then he put them back in just to store them in the oven. Forgot about them. Woke up the next morning, black potatoes, just crispy. I would imagine a smoke alarm probably would have been engaged there.
Yeah.
He needs to invest in smoke alarms.
It turns out you can vaporize a potato in a microwave, except for the skin.
So, well, this is a convection, but still, I'm sure that you can get pretty close. So, and he said, thank God for the potatoes, because if I didn't smell the char, I might not have realized this thing was on before I left the house for work.
Wow. Yeah. It's got to be a user error though, right? It's well. Here's the fix. So we will need to upgrade the GPS so that the June app can tell if you are actually in the kitchen of your house. We need that level of GPS accuracy, and it also needs to integrate with the Nest cameras from Google so they can get a visual on if you're in the kitchen.
But yeah, at that point, it's geared to your wife's phone, right? And she has to run out and get an ingredient that she forgot. And you're trying to cook. And the June is like, I don't think so, Dave.
The whole kitchen is just like, no.
Yeah, that is a terrible, terrible idea. Now, the idea, it does seem convenient to preheat your oven from your phone. Because it sucks to get out of bed and preheat the oven only to go back to bed for 15 minutes before you can cook your tendies. So it makes a lot of sense, yeah, but at what price?
Yeah.
Well, Friday, it's going to be, I've already forgotten. This was security, so it'll be social. Some interesting social stories this week.
Social nonsense and not Krista.
0% Krista.
I was kind of hoping that she would show up, but it was not to be.
Wait a minute. Is next weekend? No. Next Sunday is not officially in August. So there's probably like a 40% chance she'll be here next week.
It's Friday, August 30th. And I bet you're glad it's Friday.
It's been a tough week for everybody. I think we can safely say that.
Yeah.
Rainforest is burning.
Still.
The poor Hong Kong people.
I'm really surprised at how the extent to which China is escalating that situation.
I think, well, in terms of the people, I think that was a bit of a coiled spring. Yeah. They've dealt with a lot of despotism, so I can see how that, went too far. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about social media. And let's start with YouTube. A lot of interesting announcements from YouTube this week. Interesting developments. Maybe the most or the least interesting of which we will start with, which has to do, of course, with the poor children, because YouTube is constantly having problems being kid-friendly.
YouTube says it will now remove violent and mature videos pretending to be kid-friendly. Okay.
It's interesting. I don't watch child-related stuff on YouTube, but apparently this is pretty common. So pretending means categorizing it or tagging it or titling it in such a way that makes it seem like it's for kids. But in reality, it's sexual or violent or whatever.
Would this be one of those things that YouTube could have avoided if they just had unambiguous categories to be like, this is for YouTube kids?
No, I don't think they could have avoided this necessarily because people would still abuse that.
I wonder if our old video with the Barbie dream house would be flagged because, discussing the world technology news is probably a more mature subject matter, but everything that had Barbie dream house in it was just like the related ads and videos, like people's recommendations were messed up for weeks.
Well, it wasn't violent. I mean, it's never come to open violence in the Level 1 news.
There is a lot of really disturbing videos because I went down the rabbit hole on this, and that's what when I discovered the animal mutilation channels, and there's one channel that's just it's very bad. It's just filled with and it's like, how is this still on the internet?
Can you imagine meeting a girl at a bar and she's like, "Oh, what do you do?" "I'll have an animal mutilation channel on YouTube." It's I have 200,000 subscribers. It's very popular. This week we're doing a raccoon. And the YouTube union we talked about before. Turns out now this was the slingshot guy. I watched this guy's videos, although I usually see him in terms of doing like crossbows and stuff. I didn't even know he did slingshots. But he is leading this coalition to try and get more rights. And YouTube tried to ignore it, but ultimately could not.
Google agrees to meet with YouTubers union right before the deadline. So this is in Europe. There's a guy that's forming a union of YouTubers, and it's like the future of work. And Google's like, oh no, we can't just mess with stuff. So the plan is for this union, the union's plan, I should say, is for them to use European laws like the GDPR to force Google to disclose exactly how the algorithm works. Currently, it seems to be powered by clickbait. If you see a video thumbnail or something from our channel and you click into it, it's powered by the thumbnail. Whereas in the past, it was more powered by like content and watch time. We did pretty good. But now where it's clickbait, not so much.
Now, YouTube's response to this was kind of weird. They said, we are happy to come to the table and sit down and talk about the future of work and, blah, blah. But they were very clear to point out, we will not be meeting these demands.
We're not going to negotiate.
And
that's what they said, actually.
This guy's response was, that's the only solution. You will give us what we want, or we're going to take it to the next level. So
I would say that nothing will come of this. But the fact that the European laws are so restrictive, I think the European Union being sympathetic to this situation, it's like, look, these are creators. They want to earn money by creating videos that people want to watch. What can you precisely specify on what criteria your algorithm judges a video to do well? I think that the European Union probably would force Google to disclose that.
It would really hurt them because
people will then game the system.
Well, not just that, but guaranteed it is a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's totally ad based.
Yeah.
And when we find that out, it's going to be very embarrassing for Google and YouTube.
Yeah.
But that would be a great day if we do find that out. Now, the other problem with YouTube that everybody experiences is DMCA and strikes and copyrights and things like that. Last week we found out they're kind of changing it a little bit in terms of the background music thing. But this article points out there is so much wrong with it.
Man sued for using bogus YouTube takedowns to get address for swatting. YouTube sues man for multiple egregious abuses of the DMCA takedown processes. Now, if this story sounds familiar, it's because it is. This is the same story, same guy that was harassing Minecraft players who do 2 strikes on their channel and then send them a thing that's like, you got to pay me, $150 or whatever, and I won't send you a third strike. But if you don't pay me, then I'm going to have your channel erased. So it turns out this guy was also doing that to get addresses for swatting.
But that's only if you outed him and argued with him about the other thing. Now, YouTube finding out about this and actually getting to the bottom of it, somebody finally got a human being to respond on the YouTube end, which is almost impossible with DMCA. Now they have decided to sue this individual on behalf of...
Because it's pretty great. I mean, with Google, you got to imagine they've got a rather large army of lawyers on retainer. It seems like that this should have been dealt with sooner because of that.
Now, you're probably thinking, as I was when I read that, why are they suing that person? That's criminal. Swatting is criminal. What they did is they should be in prison. The problem is they can't actually prove that that person did the swatting. So, seems, I mean, the evidence is circumstantial, but it is a lot. There's a lot of it. So, I don't know. We'll see. Moving to Facebook, do you remember when Mark Zuckerberg was on his apology tour and he said, I know that, what we did was wrong and blah, 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 and privacy. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to take all this data about how we do all this horrible stuff and we're going to let people study it. And you'll see it's a force for good. That sounded pretty good, right? Sounded kind of like the story we did in the last episode with the tips, the DoorDash tips.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, let's do that. And then the same thing has happened here.
Facebook has said it would give detailed data to academics. They're still waiting. I think the only way to feel reasonably confident about this project is if you ignore what's happened over the past 16 months. I think Facebook did this study internally, and it was very bad.
Yeah.
And they were like, we probably shouldn't give this to academics.
And they're trying to figure out a way to give them something that's watered down in a way that they can't figure out if it's watered down.
Yeah.
There's probably a team working real hard on that.
Yeah.
So
a lot of misdirection and subterfuge.
But that
would be my guess.
That in itself probably just goes to show you how bad it is. Because it's so bad, they're willing to just ignore the fact that he said that. We've also learned about Libra, the Facebook currency, and there was a lot of hype.
A lot of U.S. policymakers also really scared of that.
Yeah. The hype about Libra was so big, and the reason it was so big is because of his coalition of the willing among all the banks and businesses, and they're like, yeah, well, sure, we'll take that. I mean, it's Facebook, right? Well, that group, which Gizmodo calls the crypto mafia, they've started to hear from some of those lawmakers.
Members of Facebook's crypto mafia reportedly getting cold feet about the Libra currency. They're like, guys, maybe we shouldn't do this. I don't know. This doesn't make a lot of sense, blah, blah, blah. My guess for what's happening behind the scenes is that Goldman Sachs is involved with the whole Apple credit card, and all of these people are going to form a new organization and do the cryptocurrency, but it's just going to appear. That way lawmakers don't have a chance to respond. It's like, that's not Facebook. That's Goldman Sachs plus Facebook plus whatever. It doesn't have to be Goldman Sachs. It could be some other finance organization. It might be Jamie Dimon. We don't know.
But here's the thing. Goldman Sachs is a powerful criminal organization. There's no question about it. Facebook is a powerful criminal organization.
Their interests are aligned on this thing. So
you join all their powers together, and you have a truly monolithic, powerful criminal organization. None of those come close to that of the Federal Reserve, the ultimate criminal organization. You don't mess with them.
Well, there goes the monetization.
And they, in turn, control the IRS, the most intense criminal gang in the world. And they will not tolerate.
And wasn't the IRS supposed to be abolished after the war was over?
The IRS was created to service the Federal Reserve, as was the income tax. Facebook sells ads. That's how they make their money. And what we've learned is that Facebook has caught a lot of flack because you can advertise things that people don't like. And when you advertise things that people don't like, you get backlash. So Facebook has set up these rules where when you see an ad, you can dislike it and you can tell them why you dislike it. And for example, if you say that it's like bad science or fake news or something like that, you can get it taken down. And you can do that even in cases where it's a really mundane thing.
How flat earthers nearly derailed a space photo book. Now, I didn't get a chance to read this because New York Times. But I think I saw this somewhere else, and this guy was working on raising money for a photo book of space, and the flat earthers were like, space? That's fake news.
Yeah, well, so what he wants to do is he wants to photograph all of these NASA artifacts, like the moon landing suits. They've still got them, and pieces of the spacecraft, whatever. He wants to do like a coffee table book type of thing for that. But what he didn't realize is that's very expensive, because it turns out they're hard to photograph. Like you can see, you got to suspend it from, and it's like some of these things are old and delicate, and it's like, if you have a spacesuit, how do you photograph that? Well, it turns out you have to fill it full of air and pressurize it. And you have to do that at NASA. They don't let you take it home. So he was like, hey, I'm going to need a lot more money to do this, but I know a lot of you have expressed interest, so I'm going to put up a Kickstarter or some kind of crowdfunding, and you can pre-buy it, and you can donate to it, and then you'll get a copy and whatever. And he bought a couple of $300 and $400 ads. They were all shut down by way of being bad science and fake news.
Now, we need to call up the Cambridge Analytica people and make a deal with them, because if we can make sure that the flat earth people are not allowed to, like, we can isolate them somehow, send them out to Australia or something, that would probably be good.
Why would you do that to the Australians?
Well, maybe some deserted island somewhere they can all live by themselves. They need to not eat. Maybe, I wonder if we can model like that type of misinformation. Like, does misinformation spread like a virus?
But it wasn't just flat earthers. The moon landing deniers were also very active.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I wonder if Huxley or Plato or Socrates could have foreseen that these types of problems would be the problems of modern society.
I think Huxley maybe, but like during Plato's time, like you don't get this kind of garbage when food is an issue. Yeah. Because these people are too busy trying to eat. Yeah. So you have to become really comfortable to get into this level.
It's very I would like to do something about this, but I don't.
You're almost always going to run into unintended consequences trying to do something about this.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, that's when you get the government, their solutions to things.
Which then becomes Orwellian.
I'm not sure how I managed to incorrectly sort these and not put this in the Facebook section, because it's another Facebook story. And this one's interesting because we talked about, well, for example, the WebKit thing, which was the last episode. Those like buttons and the Facebook pixel and the login with Facebook, they are the cornerstone of Facebook's web of tracking. So you don't necessarily have to be using Facebook for Facebook to keep an eye on you and what you're doing on other websites. And now, because of things like GDPR and being called out for Cambridge Analytica, they have to tell you about that, which is pretty amazing.
You can finally see all of the info Facebook collected about you from other websites. So this is a new tool called Off Facebook Activity. Now that was part of the announcements. That was like the whole academics thing more than 16 months ago. So I guess they don't figure that this part is particularly damning, but that one of the things mentioned in the article was like your porn preferences, if the porn site has like button integration.
Or log in with Facebook.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this, so now that you can look at the activity, but they've also got a clear history button. And you might think that deletes it, but you'd be wrong about that. It divorces it from your account, although I don't think they explicitly say that anonymizes it.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'm sure that they could piece that back together.
Yeah, they still could tell that that's you. It's just not going to appear on this dashboard anymore. So I think that button's probably a placebo.
Yes.
But at least you can find out, it might help some people understand what Facebook is when they see that, 500 pages of Pornhub clicks that they have on their history.
I think that no one will ever see what Facebook is because it is literally like the Cthulhu creatures in like Call of Cthulhu, where it's like if you could look at it and understand what it was, you would just go insane.
I suppose. I certainly don't want to look at it. And I'm sure, despite not having an account, I have a
shadow profile. Yeah, we all do.
Twitter has taken a stand, and it's interesting. I wonder. My big question is, where do they draw the line here? Because they say state-controlled, but how do you define that?
Twitter blocks state-controlled media outlets from advertising on its social network. Now, I think it's well-intentioned, but I think this is going to backfire because I would really rather know if an advertisement is like from China Daily News or like Russia Today or somewhere like that.
Well, they did draw a line, there's a discrepancy. So it's like state-run would be like those Chinese news agencies that are literally the Chinese government. There's no secret about it.
So the BBC can't advertise anymore?
No, BBC can because they are state-run. But something like RT, they consider to be state-controlled. That is not officially part of the government of Russia, but funded by it in some way.
I don't know if you listen to some of the stories from Hugh Laurie about stuff that they were trying to get past the BBC when they were doing a bit of Fry and Laurie. It seems like it's state controlled, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it is unapologetically. That's why it's okay. Like it gets past the rule because it's state run, not state controlled.
State controlled is what I meant because
no, but state run state run, they still get to make the rules. They're just not pretending not to be that.
Oh, okay.
So, but in my mind, don't you think CNN and Fox News
Fox News
are
definitely,
both state
probably
controlled?
also CNN.
Yeah. So, again, where do you draw the line?
Well, is state synonymous with like the Koch brothers there? Because one of them died. Oh. Well, here's to a happy reunion soon.
You think the other one's taking up double duty? And moving on to nonsense, we have one of the most confusing and terrifying stories that we've ever covered.
This is only confusing because the author of this article was deliberately very uncomfortable writing about this subject matter.
But also, in my mind, this is a massive contradiction. Now, let's see if you caught on to the same thing.
Man arrested for botching castration on victim he met on the dark web, deputies say. So this guy had set up a hotel room or something like a medical ward.
This was his house. He had done the hotel room one previously.
Oh, okay. See. And I think that it's a role play thing, but he took it a little too seriously and actually castrated it.
No. Okay, so therein is my confusion, right? They describe this as a castration fetish. But a fetish is inherently sexual, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if the idea of being castrated arouses you, when you wake up after the castration, you can never have that again. It's a one-time thing.
But the guy that they had to take to the hospital for the castration that was the second time he had done that or something.
No, it's the second time this guy had done it.
Oh, okay.
So the timeline is this guy claimed that he had experience. So I guess there's two sides of the coin with the castration fetish. There's the castrator and the castratee. This guy liked being the castrator. So he had found another guy, and they had done the hotel room thing, which is what you're talking about. The same thing happened. He botched it. Took that guy, dropped him off at a hospital, and then nothing ever came of it. They no charges. I guess they couldn't find him. This time around, he did it at his house, screwed it up again, and it's massive bleeding and that stuff. Dialed 911, but then got cold feet and hung up. Well, when you hang up on 911, guess what happens?
They're still there.
Yeah, they show up. And when they showed up, he was very frank, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I was castrating this guy, and there's some bleeding."
This really should have been the last story of nonsense, but
I think we got one that's just as good for the last story. I like to start strong and end strong. We live in a college town, and I have noticed two things. Now, the college students have come back. It's that time of year. We're back for the fall semester. I've noticed two things. First of all, blue and pink hair off the charts. There's so much blue and pink hair. It's amazing. The other thing, every one of them vapes. There are so many vape clouds. And that's bad news for our young people.
The Verge has the article that more than 100 vapors have contracted a severe lung disease per CDC. 153 people have been diagnosed. So shortness of breath and some other symptoms, you might have this lung disease. Turns out having this vapor in your lungs constantly is bad.
Can't rip those huge clouds, man. They don't know exactly what causes it. They don't, obviously vaping is the thing, but they don't know. It doesn't seem like it's like a virus or bacteria. So they don't really know exactly what's going on.
Swamp lung.
I guess.
It'll be funny if they discover that it's like a malfunctioning like vaporizer or something like that.
Yeah.
Or contaminated fluid.
Well, I'm sure like most of those vaporizer parts are made in China, right?
Oh, we've got bacteria. Yeah, we've got bacteria and viruses that we got to worry about. What if like vape technology is like the perfect environment for lichens, and now we have these like, malicious attacking lichens where it's like, oh, it's a hybrid.
And that could be like a zombie apocalypse where they take over your body, but then you're still, moving around. You're just controlled by. It could be like a cordyceps type deal where it's the zombie apocalypse, but all they want is more vape.
That's basically college already.
They want more vape and communism. I put this story in just for Krista because I thought, surely to God, she wasn't going to miss an entire month.
She is legit scared of black holes.
She's terrified of them. And you know what? Maybe everybody else should be too now that we know this new information.
Scientists are 99% sure they have just detected a black hole eating a neutron star. This is actually really cool. This article talks a little bit about that and how they did that. But there's this new thing, relatively new thing in astronomy. Well, probably not, astronomy is not the right word, but looking at stuff in space. Multi-messenger astronomy, which means that the first thing that happened is they detected the gravitational waves. There was a disturbance in the force, specifically the gravitational force, that was the herald of a black hole eating a neutron star, probably, because we've seen one black hole eating another black hole and we've seen neutron stars merging. This one was a little different. And that is the first thing that is detectable. And based on where those gravitational waves came from, we can point all of our optical instruments in that general direction and look for other things that come later. So this is so far away. The gravity waves, I guess, got here 2 years ago. And now we're expecting the optical component any day now.
If the remnants of a neutron star can escape a black hole, no one knows. Because as far as anybody knows, we've never seen anything like this. We've never encountered a black hole eating a neutron star. What's cool about this is the neutron star and the black hole are two of the end games for a star. So it's kind of like a giant boss fight. Although I don't think there's any universe in which the neutron star ever wins. No. It always loses. But, maybe it'll put up a good fight.
I'm not sure if we've ever detected a black hole evaporating on the gravitational wave thing, because theoretically, I guess if Hawking is right, black holes could evaporate.
You could read this headline before I resized the window, but now the ad blocker hides it. But you can still read the title bar.
Oh, the title bar says Maple Falls man allegedly damaged power lines and meter boxes.
Oh, that leaves out the most important part about this story.
I missed this one.
So this actually will create a little bit of, like a lead up to the story, because so what happened was this guy was just running around cutting meter boxes and power lines
Why?
all over the place. And people kept calling. They were like, hey, my power went out. And I saw a guy with bolt cutters running through the yard. So they tracked him down. The reason he was doing it, and it seems obvious in hindsight, was to stop the KGB. Because the KGB was using those power lines to steal certain information. And he needed to prevent that. How did he know? Ariana Grande had notified him and let him know that he needed to cut these wires.
I look forward to the day where, like, we're being interviewed, or like somebody shows up and it's like, somebody was saying that you guys told him to whatever on the Level 1 news, and it's like, what now?
That will be a milestone of popularity, won't it? Here is the best part about this story. The police were familiar with this guy.
Of course they were.
Why? Because he was doing similar stuff the week before, and he gave the same excuse about the KGB. In one case, he had broken into a man's garage, moved everything to the curb, and when questioned, he said, no, the KGB stole that, and I'm giving it back to the community. He was released under his own recognizance from jail each time.
Well, I mean, I don't think the jails are equipped to deal with people that have a mental illness.
Yeah, that's a big thing, because we got rid of all the insane asylums and stuff, and you literally, if you're crazy, you go to jail.
Well, it's actually for the people that are internationals. This is the pattern of what happens. Is like this person is clearly not mentally stable, but they will keep doing escalating things until they do something that is actually a crime, and then they just end up in jail when clearly there was not criminal intent here. The dude's just legit insane.
But
better than not having them in public, I guess, but not a very functional.
But
or effective treatment.
also creates a real bad situation in the jail.
Yeah.
Because what do you do with that person?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're okay, think about it from a perspective of the Department of Corrections, right?
Yeah.
You've got a guy who did a fairly minor crime, and as far as you know, isn't violent, just annoying. And he's every single day, he's painting the entirety of his cell with human feces, and you have to clean that up. What are you going to do?
Straight jacket,
Just
solitary.
just pop him back in the street. No, you can't. Straight jacket's cruel and unusual.
Oh.
So you just get rid of him. You just promote him out to the real world again.
He's harmless.
And he might be, unless you're a power line. Do you remember?
Where did you get the bolt cutters?
Probably stole them. Do you remember the Red Bull gives you wings?
Yeah.
And that Red Bull started doing that event where you try to drive your glider off the big. You remember seeing that thing?
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, literal wings. Well, the Canadians don't quite understand the nuances of advertising.
Red Bull is paying $10 to Canadians who thought it would actually give them wings.
That's right, folks.
Were those the flat earthers?
Now I call out the Canadians. Unfortunately, we can't, stand on any higher ground here, because what happened was one of the guys who started this lawsuit. We did a class action here in the U.S. and he tried to be a part of that, but they were like, "No, you're Canadian. You can't do this." So his answer was, "Do the same thing in Canada." And I
successfully, apparently.
$850,000 is the pot. So they estimate you'll get about $10 a piece.
Is this like the $130 or Equifax thing where it's actually going to be like $1.50?
But it's only $10. You know what? I constantly get these little mailers. They're basically just postcards that you peel apart, and most of them are in Japanese. And there's a tiny little section in English, and it's from the guy who's managing the Mount Gox because I had a little bit of Bitcoin in there, and he's just laboriously reporting the things that are happening with that.
Wow. What an incredible waste of money sending you those postcards. Like, wouldn't you rather just have that as cryptocurrency?
I don't imagine I'm ever getting anything back. And I barely had, I think I had like 0.1. Although that's more now than it was then for sure.
Yeah.
Well.
All that Bitcoin still exists somewhere too. It's the really annoying thing.
Somebody's got that. This is a terrifying story, and the reason why is very impressive, and this is a harbinger of a terrifying future if global warming and climate change is what they say it is.
Hurricanes are causing more aggressive spiders to evolve. And so this is in, what was it, North Carolina?
Yeah, it's one of the hurricane alley places.
And so, like, what happens is one of these storms comes through with really high winds, and it, wipes out the insect population. The spiders have to be more aggressive in that situation when when the rest of the insect, there's nothing for the spiders to eat. So they have to be more aggressive. And repeated hurricane seasons that wipe out insect populations are producing this trait in spiders.
Now, if you're like me, you read this and you said to yourself, how the hell do you measure that? What do you do? Well, it turns out they actually have a scientific way of doing this. They go and they track webs, although spider webs are kind of, like temporary structures. So I imagine they have to do this fairly quickly. But what they do is they go and they'll tap on the web and they'll study it. And they measure aggression by how many and how quickly spiders show up to deal with whatever tapped the web. And what they figured out is in cyclone areas and hurricane areas, a lot of angry spiders show up when you tap the web because they've learned that,
if they don't deal with it now, they're not going to get anything.
Exactly. Make hay while the sun shines, as the little spider brains are telling them. And so it just keeps getting worse.
I, for one, would like to see Disney's remake of Charlotte's Web with like a much more metal and aggressive Charlotte. That would be amazing.
It's 5 minutes of video, and at the end, there's a pig-sized cocoon, and Charlotte is just bloated.
The most amazing heavy metal ever. Yeah.
So we've had all these challenges and internet trends, and one is more horrific than the next, and they're all so stupid. And when you see a headline like this, you feel a little bit better about the world.
Arrest warrant issued in ice cream licking incident in Texas. This guy's probably already been picked up by now. So, the short version of this is some dude went into a Walmart on social media. He recorded a video of him going into a Walmart and opening a can of Bluebell ice cream and licking it and then putting it back. And then, that was it. That was the end of the video. But store surveillance footage they found later showed him actually buying that. But because of people freaking out online, they figured out what Walmart it was, and then that Walmart was just like, we're going to throw away all of the Bluebell ice cream. So dude licked the ice cream, bought the ice cream that he opened and licked in the store, but it didn't show that on social media. And so the prosecutor in this is like, okay, we're gonna get him for criminal mischief because, freak out, like causing a public freak out or whatever.
But do we, and I guess it depends on the angle of the camera, but do we for sure know that he couldn't have sleight of handed and grabbed a different carton?
Walmart's own surveillance footage shows him buying the same carton.
Okay. Wow. I don't like it when people eat the food in the grocery store.
I don't like it when ice cream companies don't have tamper-evident packaging.
Well, I think, now this was a paper carton, right? And they do have like the tear strip.
Well, it looked like he just popped the top off, and it was like you couldn't tell.
I've noticed more and more ice cream going to that, I assume, because of these stories. Now, of course, this trend started with the one girl on Twitter who did it, also at a Walmart, and that Walmart also had to throw away all of the ice cream.
Now, up until the point that they were like, oh, he actually did buy the ice cream, I would have been all for the death penalty.
Yeah. I mean, that is a threat to public health, for sure.
Right up there with pooping on the walls.
It should be death penalty by gavaging ice cream. great would that be?
People foie gras.
Bluebell, that's a cow as their mascot, right?
Yeah.
So you make a great Bluebell fursuit, and then televise the Bluebell cow gavaging this guy with their finest ice cream.
I don't think YouTube permits that kind of video anymore. A few years ago, that would have been fine.
We'll put it on BitChute. That's fine. Oh, Anderson Cooper. He looks so pensive. Well, we didn't talk about this on the news. It's not, I guess it's kind of technology related, but they had this mysterious explosion in Russia. And
A little bit of nuclear fallout.
a little, just a bit. And it probably was them working on some kind of nuclear weapon or technology, but they're very hush-hush about it.
KG, I would say.
KGB. And
that's worth an update right there.
But here's the thing about it. Some people died.
Two people died.
And those people were nuclear scientists.
And a lot of other people got sick.
So, yeah. When something like that happens, bad things happen. They go to hospitals, and the hospitals test them, and they're like, "Oh, you're irradiated." So how do you explain that? And the Russian government says it's very simple.
Russia officials blame cesium exposure on Fukushima crabs. So one of the guys went on vacation to Thailand and said, "Oh, you don't have any external exposure. It is entirely in your digestive tract. So we think that you had irradiated crabs." And Putin was asked about this, and he literally said, "It's like we can't substantiate this, but what doctors are saying this? I need some names." It's like,
So what's the thing about they figured out how many bananas you would need to eat to irradiate yourself to a dangerous level.
It was a lot. It was
It was like in the thousands, right?
Have you watched the HBO Fukushima thing, or not Fukushima? Chernobyl.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that yet. Does it have the thing in there about the guy who was begging to die from radiation exposure?
Oh yeah.
So that should have the people that died had more radiation exposure than that guy, or they died of something else.
But what I'm thinking about with the banana thing is how many crabs would you have to eat? That'd be a lot of crabs.
It would be a lot of crabs.
Of course, I guess we don't know how exposed each crab was, but you're just eating the legs, and I still think that would be a lot of crab.
Well, there's also, the best lie has a little bit of truth in it, and hospitals can detect a little bit of those kinds of things. I know somebody that went to Canada and was getting, they just had the little tracer thing. You take this little tracer thing and you pee it out in 3 days. And the radiation detectors at the border were so sensitive, it was surrounded the vehicle with armed people, and it was no, I had a medical procedure, and they're like, oh, okay, it's fine. Because I guess I hadn't dialed in the settings. That wasn't too long after 9/11.
What a great way to bring nukes into the country. Just take some of that stuff. Yeah. And it's no, look, my pee is orange.
And no, they searched everything. They took the side panels off the car and stuff. but it's not the hospitals can detect that very tiny level of radiation. And this was many, many times that. But for radiation to actually kill you fairly quickly is an astonishingly high dose.
But I'm saying... Yeah, I'm considering the fact that this guy had a high dose. I'm saying how many crabs would result in this dose? It would have to be a lot of crabs.
It would be. He would have to gavage on crabs,
which would be tough to do because you'd have to mix them down into a slurry, and that's not something you want to do on a Taiwanese vacation.
Yeah. Now you could definitely eat crab that is not good for you. Some of that stuff gets into your thyroid gland, and the danger is that that it becomes a part of your body, and then it's there being radioactive forever, which is one of the great things with your thyroid and iodine. It's iodine, I guess, because that prevents your thyroid from taking up the radioactive material, so you pee and poop it out.
That was actually a big part of the Chernobyl story because, it played out such a long amount of time, and it was, these people died immediately. These people were dead by the time the trial came around. These people knew they were dying during the trial because of all the cancer. And it was just everybody's going to die. It's dark, but it's different levels of it.
The one guy that had like just the right exposure, they kept him alive artificially for a long time, and they should just let him die. That was very like there's videos of that, and it was very, very disturbing.
Yeah, the whole thing was pretty disturbing.
I mean, he was like his arm fell off, and he was just like, "Let me die." And they were like, "No, we're gonna keep you alive."
Now, you said we should do the castration thing as the final story, but I think this is better for the final story because it's somewhat uplifting. And it shows that, but just because a symbol or a thing has fallen from grace, it doesn't mean it can't rise again like the phoenix.
I really wish we could use this as part of the thumb, but there's no way we can. Pepe the Frog, an alt-right symbol in the U.S., has emerged as the face of the Hong Kong protests. So the creator of Pepe the Frog says that Pepe is a symbol of love, and the Hong Kong protesters have embraced that meaning, I think.
I think it's a matter of people in Hong Kong not really understanding. So here we have, of course, a MAGA hat makes you an evil fascist, and we have that with Pepe there. And a lot of people do definitely now associate. Of course, Pepe was a 4chan thing, and then 4chan was also branded as maybe rightly so in a lot of cases. But the Chinese didn't have any idea about any of that, and they just like Pepe because Pepe is inherently likable. There's something about him.
Better than Winnie the Pooh. If they had adopted Winnie the Pooh, pretty sure Hong Kong would have already been nuked.
Now this raises the question, and I'm guessing probably already in the works, how long before all instances of those fresh Pepe memes are banned beyond the Great Firewall?
I would say by the time this episode goes live, there are already several stories that we will cover next week about that.
Do you think if you post a Pepe image on the internal communication stuff, are they using that active filter?
Yeah, deleted
to get rid of him.
Yeah,
that's going to be hilarious because the great thing about Pepe is there's so many Pepe memes, so they're going to have to work overtime. And if they do like a loose image recognition AI, how much is Kermit the Frog going to suffer from this?
I think that we're not very far away from the Great Firewall of China AI from being good enough to do in real time. Like in the episode of The Simpsons where Lisa had a pen pal in like some ambiguous Eastern Europe country, and Lisa's reading the letter and it's being read in like the little girl's voice with like the English accent, like the Eastern European accent, but it's being read in English. And then like the voice changes to like a grizzled, haggard old general dude. That's what the Great Firewall of China is doing in real time in software with this stuff.
What would you replace Pepe with?
Probably All Hail the Emperor and Long Live China and China #1. That kind of thing.
Oh, they are #1 in certain categories.
All hail Dictator Chang. All right, that's it for the news this week. Maybe next week we'll have Krista.
I'd say there's a 40% chance.